Hey! Hi, how you doing? This is Ryan, and welcome back to the Gamertron Show. I know I'm a broken record at this point, but I'm so sorry. I know it's taking me forever to produce content for you guys. I swear I'm working as fast as I reasonably can. I know the year 2020 is almost over, and I still haven't released my top 10 video games of 2019 video. Yes, I know, this is ridiculous, and y'all have been so patient with me. Recording footage for this video has just been a nightmare. My recording software and the games themselves have been a wee bit uncooperative. I'm hoping to have the top 10 video released this month in November, but as always, I can't offer any guarantees. And as always, again, I'm so sorry. But you guys all deserve some content, so I'm gonna throw this together quick and I hope you enjoy it. Consider this a distracting appetizer while I continue to work on the main course. Now anyways, have all of you ever played the video game Dragon's Dogma? I have. Dragon's Dogma is awesome. I love the game. And I always found it odd that outside of re-releasing the game on PC, Capcom hasn't done anything with the franchise in almost a decade, which is why I was so happy and excited to see Netflix announce they're producing and releasing a new Dragon's Dogma animated show this year. I thought to myself, oh, this is great. They're going to do to Dragon's Dogma what they did with Castlevania. Dragon's Dogma has such a great high fantasy world and setting to write an entertaining and compelling story in. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. The show is hot garbage. The show is so bad that I'm making this video. And I don't make videos about TV shows. It's just not what I do. But the show is so bad and so disrespectful to the source material. And the advertising for this is so misleading that for the first time ever, I feel compelled to make a video to just vent about this trash. I wasted around 4 hours of my life, an entire evening watching this trash. I want to get something out of it and might as well be some ad revenue. For courtesy's sake, just so you know, I'm spoiling everything about this show. So if you're curious to watch the show yourself and form your own opinions, now's the time to stop the video. Okay, there was your spoiler warning, here we go. The show's called Dragon's Dogma, but outside of there being a dragon, the protagonist being an arisen, someone who has had their heart stolen by a dragon, and the secondary protagonist being a pawn, the race of companions who live to serve the arisen. Outside of having these free main character outlines from the game, the Dragon's Dogma Netflix TV show has little to nothing to do with the Dragon's Dogma video game. It outright ignores all the lore and world building from the game, and completely abandons the game's themes of adventure, bravery, selflessness, and heroism in overcoming adversity. Now don't get me wrong, the writing, storytelling, character development of Dragon's Dogma the video game was quite shallow. A totally fair criticism to make that it lacked depth. It may have been shallow, simplistic, safe, but you know what? At least it wasn't fucking pretentious. Look at the titles of all 7 episodes of the Dragon's Dogma show. Well, what do we have here? The 7 Deadly Sins. Gee, I wonder what each of these episodes is gonna be about. Some of you may suspect that, based on this alone, that it's going to present a preachy, nihilistic take on humanity. And you're 100% right. Dragon's Dogma, the show, appears to have had 2 goals in mind. Show off some flashy, well-animated action scenes, that I will wholly admit and give credit to, and beat the viewer over the head with, the 7 deadly sins are bad, humans suck, people are sinners. Okay. What the fuck does that have to do with Dragon's Dogma? The 7 deadly sins were never the overarching themes or main story elements in the original video game. The Dragon's Dogma TV show is so grimdark and nihilistic, and that's never what Dragon's Dogma was about. Dragon's Dogma was more high fantasy adventure. Yes, there was some darkness to it, but nothing like Game of Thrones or The Witcher. Dragon's Dogma was always more like and took more inspiration from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Dragon's Dogma the video game was filled with hope, adventure, a sense of awe and wonder, camaraderie. Yes, the world was filled with big scary monsters that wanted to kill and eat people, but there were honorable knights, protectors, adventurers waiting to face them. Dragon's Dogma was never Game of Thrones, it was never The Witcher. But the creators of the Dragon's Dogma TV show, specifically the main writer, Kurasami Sanyama, instead of building upon the high fantasy strengths of the Dragon's Dogma video game, he instead decided to write a plot that's nothing more than a nihilistic, low-effort, grim-dark fantasy knockoff. It's also clear that Mr. Sanyama never played the video game, as he completely butchers or outright ignores the lore of the game. The origins and motivations of the dragon are completely butchered and changed for no reason. Succubuses are now shape-shifting rapist murderers, and goblins are also rapists too? What the fuck? This is Dragon's Dogma, not Goblin Slayer! Goblins in Dragon's Dogma don't actively hunt women to rape. There's now highly addictive and deadly drugs in the world? Hardcore addictive drugs were never a thing in Dragon's Dogma. All of these dark adult themes and story elements are so fucking forced. But you wouldn't know about all of these changes and additions if you hadn't played the original Dragon's Dogma video game. And that's why this show pisses me off so much, and I've never been this pissed off at a show before. It completely disrespects and misrepresents the source material. If you haven't played the video game and you watch this show, it's gonna leave you with the false impression that the game is just this edgy Game of Thrones Witcher knockoff, when Dragon's Dogma is actually classical high fantasy. But outside of completely misrepresenting and disrespecting the source material, the actual writing of this show is so fucking bad. This genuinely feels like a high schooler's first draft. I'm in shock that this was written by a professional who actually has a lot of critically acclaimed anime under his belt that he's written. But the writing in Dragon's Dogma is so amateurish and so flawed. Let me tell you why. So each episode is about a deadly sin, right? And the show is seemingly trying to tell you how and why the people committing these sins and the sins themselves are bad. But then there's context within each and every episode that blatantly contradicts this. Episode 2, Gluttony. The villain of this episode, a gluttonous mayor who is stealing and eating all of his citizens' food for himself. Our protagonist defeats and exposes him. After he does this, the people of the land kill the mayor, ransack his castle, take their food back, and eat it. And the show honestly tries to imply that the citizens are the gluttonous ones because they're taking back, fighting over, and eating their food that was stolen from them. Keep in mind, all of these people have been starving to death because the governor was stealing and hoarding all their food for himself. But via our protagonist breaking down in tears after all these events, the music, the camera shots, the artwork, it's all obviously trying to imply that the citizens, the people of the land, these poor starving people were the gluttonous ones the whole time. These people were literally starving to death. And the show wants to preach that all these people are sinners. Because God forbid these people stuff their faces with the food that was stolen from them and denied to them. Kurasumi! What the fuck kind of message are you trying to send? Somehow, this absolutely nonsensical, irrational storytelling gets even worse in the next episodes. Episode 3, Envy. I'm just gonna lay out the whole shebang for you and you tell me if this has anything to do with the sin of envy. Goblins attack a traveling group of elite guard escorting a married couple. They are saved by the protagonist. Husband of the married couple failed to protect his wife during the goblin attack. The wife tries to have sex with the protagonist later that night. Then a griffin attacks, and goblins come back. Griffin is defeated, the husband kills some goblins and drives them away, but turns out he's crazy, so he kills his wife, then feeling sadness and guilt, immediately kills himself right after. What the fuck did any of that have to do with envy? If you want to showcase envy, wouldn't you have the husband try and kill the protagonist? Because he would be envious that the protagonist saved his wife, and he couldn't, and his wife is sexually attracted to our protagonist and not him? I mean, that's such an obvious setup to showcase the sin of envy. But instead, you went this absolutely nonsensical route just for the sake of a shocking twist. It's so forced and unnatural, with no foreshadowing or build-up. It's So bad. Next episode, Sloth. Apparently, the sinners this time around are the villagers, who spend all day smoking that newly introduced highly addictive drug. The whole episode basically boils down to drugs are bad, but the whole framing of these villagers doing these drugs, making them lazy bad people, doesn't work, because the writer decided to add the extra context that the people currently living in the village grew up in that village where they're harvesting this drug. They were literally born in this village. They've never left this village. This village is their world, and this drug is a part of the village. It's a part of its economy. Like, it's a part of their world. It's all they know. So they're not really sinners. They don't know any better, and this is technically a part of their culture. So the whole condemnation of these people, of look at these people being sloths for doing all these hardcore addictive drugs, doesn't work, because they literally grew up in this village where these drugs are a part of the way of life there. Sin requires intent and sometimes malice. For God's sakes, these people aren't doing anything wrong. They're not going out and attacking other villages. They're just hanging out in their village doing drugs and having sex, because this is the environment they grew up in. This is all they know. Oh my God. I thought you wanted to showcase the 7 deadly sins, but apparently our writer here doesn't have any clue how the fuck they work! Next episode, Greed. The greed in this episode is literally a magical curse that takes away people's free will and makes people obsessed over this hoarded treasure. Now, I don't want to get a copyright claim, so I can't show you this scene in its entirety, but I can play you the audio. So this character is infected by the curse of the greedy lich. I want you to keep in mind with this dialogue you're about to hear that this is what the writer believes to be greedy.
The world is a complicated place, Simon. It's not black and white like you think it is. Those in power want to stay in power, and in order to do that, they have to keep us down. I'm tired of being treated like a dog. I deserve this.
You sound like the Lich.
Literally everything he just said was 1, completely true, 2, totally rational, and 3, completely reasonable. But apparently to the show, this is our selected sinner of the episode and a tragic fallen hero. What the actual fuck? Mr. Kurasumi Sanayama? Sir, I don't know you personally, but based on your writing presented here, I'm getting the impression that you're a bad person, and your worldview is really fucked up. Next episode, Lust. The Lust in this regard is a shape-shifting succubus who hypnotizes and manipulates her victims. She basically takes away their will and means to consent, rapes them, and drains them of their life force. But the show and its writer is literally so insane that it actually openly declares that the victims of the succubus were the lustful ones. Listen to this!
The weak-willed are all too eager to be consumed by their lust. Humans pretend to be moral creatures, but are driven by their most base instincts.
The victims didn't give in to any desires. The succubus shapeshifted, hypnotized, and manipulated them. She fucking raped and killed them. But the victims are the lustful ones? What the fuck? Sanyama doesn't know how sins work! This show's plot is nothing but a collection of victim blaming and victim shaming. Every episode it's accusing victims of being sinners. As fucked up as that is, in and of itself, it still brings me back to the question of what the fuck does this have to do with Dragon's Dogma? Why is this show called Dragon's Dogma when it has barely anything to do with Dragon's Dogma? Yes, you've lifted character names and archetypes and creatures from the game, but the themes, the plot, and the world building for this show are so far detached from the game, so far removed from the source material that this isn't Dragon's Dogma. And you know what makes this all worse? You know what makes this show all the more painful is that it actually had potential with our secondary protagonist, Hannah. Hannah is actually, I would argue, a decent character, a likable character. She actually has a character arc throughout this 7-episode series, and you see her develop, you see her change episode from episode. She goes from cold and calculating and solely about rational thought to someone who's actually kind and caring. Hannah was honestly the primary factor I watched the show to the end, and the primary source of Dragon's Dogma fan service, as she actually used spells and attacks from the game. And like I mentioned earlier in the video, the action scenes in the show are actually perfectly fine. They're decent, they're well made. I was mildly entertained by them. They're flashy and well animated, but the story, the writing, the rest of the characters are just dreadful. And I'd argue one of the primary reasons for that is this stupid-ass focus on the 7 deadly sins, which was totally unnecessary. Dragon's Dogma was never about the 7 deadly sins, and the 7 deadly sins theme in the show is so fucking forced. I don't know how the creators of the show managed to do it, but they managed to make a video game from 2012, the original Dragon's Dogma, have a better fucking story, a better plot than this show, this high-budget anime Netflix production published in 2020. And the plot from the video game isn't even that good, but it's still better than the show's. That's an accomplishment right there. Despite the weak plot, the Dragon's Dogma video game still had an excellent fantasy world to tell a story in, and Netflix squandered it. Why couldn't you just let the creators of Castlevania make this? Oh man, such wasted potential. Here's hoping at least that with the release of the show, that finally means we're gonna get Dragon's Dogma 2 sometime, eh? I hope y'all got some entertainment out of this video. I'm gonna get back to work on the big important projects, and I will hopefully have those ready for all of you very soon. Thank you again, all of you, for your patience, your support, your viewership. It really means so much to me. Anyways, that's been a video. If you liked the video, hit the like button. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feelings, and opinions in the comment section down below. If you want to help out and support this video, then please share it on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit. And if you want to help out and support me directly, well, there's always Patreon and Ko-Fi. Anyways, that's been a video, and I'll see you all later. And go play Dragon's Dogma. It's a great video game.